listen, I listen. The sound that goes on up in the ground, in the here and now. Hear the song of the earth, should be singing in the side, in the circle round. The sound that carries the ancient memory constantly, gracefully, calling us to heal. Now stewards are we from the inner world to the world we see, raising up our voice for unity. Here in the now, I am hearing the now as I listen, and 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 I listen.
Hello, I'm known as Eurosoul online, and that's a name which refers to the fact that you are a soul. In a way, it's the answer to the question, why don't you have a real name? It's because you're a soul and I'm a soul, and I don't really think we need names because we're souls, and if we were, let's say, a bit more aware of that and conscious of that, maybe we'd be able to communicate without the barrier of names getting in the way. So anyway, that's who I am online. You can find me on eureka.org, ureka.org, and steemit.com, and a variety of other networks as well. So this series of videos, of which this is the introduction, is on the topic of healing, balancing and evolving, which are three key intentions that form the underpinning of the social network that I've created at eureka.org, and also they are essentially the three intentions which I understand to be most needed and most powerful for us as individuals and as society if we're going to solve our problems and create peace and prosperity. So just a little bit about my background. I trained as a professional software engineer, systems engineer and business analyst actually, which means that I have spent a lot of time working with logic, solving problems and creating solutions to problems, and come from a family of engineers who also live that way in their own way as well. So in short, I've spent a lot of time looking at how to solve problems and solving problems in high pressure situations. So when I turned my focus to health, which I needed to do in my early 20s as I had serious health problems, I continued the ways of thinking that I'd learned earlier, and also through other practices such as martial arts and meditation and yoga and so on that I was doing. I brought all these things together, along with also a really voracious appetite for studying metaphysical books, channelings and other unusual kind of spiritual sources of information. I brought all this together and actually was able to heal myself of quite a serious spinal misalignment that I had following a car accident, which numerous professionals have been unable to help with, ranging from osteopath, neurologist, physiotherapist, maxillofacial specialist, lots of different people. Really none of them got to the root cause of the issue, which as it turned out was emotional in my case. So the short version is I've learned a lot about healing from practical experience, from listening to many professionals, many experts of all different fields, reading books, sometimes talking to them, sometimes having appointments with them. I've joined various groups for emotional healing and psychological healing and so on, out of the mainstream, using methods that aren't accepted or understood by the majority. And the short thing here is basically I've had really amazing results. I've seen other people have miraculous healing. I've had instant healing in the blink of an eye, things that professionals had no idea how to resolve, simply through applying some of the things that I'm going to explain in this video series. I have already written about this at length on different social networks, but I know that many people just don't like reading and they'd much rather listen to a voice, so I thought I'd put some videos together. And so in this introductory video I'm just going to give you an overview really of what I mean when I talk about healing, balancing and evolving. So I'm also going to talk about intentions and what intentions are, because ultimately it's one thing to want or need to heal, balance and evolve, but it's another thing to actually intend to do it. And some people might think that an intention alone doesn't make any difference to the outcome of any particular scenario, but I disagree with that, and I think that ultimately your intentions have a kind of vibratory force of themselves, by themselves. They can actually change your own state of being, even when your conscious mind isn't directly engaging with them and directly thinking with those intentions in mind. So, for example, by having the intention to heal, even though you may, let's say, forget about the need to heal, ultimately, by having a deeply held intention, you are still going to be subconsciously, unconsciously moving towards that direction. You might call that a memory. You might say, oh, I've just remembered I meant to be healing. But that memory is actually associated to an intention that you're holding that you just aren't focusing on at the moment. And the more conscious you become, and the more you can convert your unconsciousness into consciousness, the easier this process will become, the more enlightened you will become, the more enlightening understandings you will have, and ultimately the easier it will be to see and understand why intentions are so powerful. So by holding the intentions to heal, balance and evolve, what you're effectively saying is, in your life you choose to have well-being, to be at peace, and to be the best version of yourself that you can be. And there's not necessarily any pressure involved in that. It's just a direction that you're choosing. And so these intentions will, under the surface, be affecting the choices you make and the decisions you make, and whether or not you're willing to dive deeply into certain topics relating to these subjects, and so on in your daily life. So first of all, it's very important to recognize the power of intentions, and then I suggest experimenting with holding the deliberate intention to heal, balance and evolve, and just seeing how that works out, because I've experienced firsthand that just by holding those intentions I experience synchronicities, as we call them, let's say chance occurrences that seem unlikely, and in my case so unlikely and so ridiculously unlikely that I know that it's more than just chance that's causing these things to be drawn into my life. So once you start seeing these things play out and you realise the value of intentions, this in itself will increase your consciousness, and it'll bring you joy, and that in itself is a form of healing as far as I'm concerned, because if you don't understand that you have powerful intentions, you can feel very much disempowered and lost and not really understand how to achieve what you need to achieve. But as soon as you see your intentions actually have the power unto themselves, that can be a really great wake-up call. So the intention to heal, most of us understand the basics of what healing is. Essentially, you have a problem or a dysfunction or an injury of some kind, and the healing is the process of correcting that and bringing you back to a state of well-being and peace. So I will extend the definition of that to include more than that which many people would include within that. So I'm not just talking about healing physical injuries, I'm talking about healing psychological, emotional injuries, societal imbalances, relationship issues, a long list of dysfunctions that we find commonly in society. All of these affect our overall state of health and our overall well-being, and from a holistic perspective we can't deny or avoid any of them and expect that our problems are going to be solved. You're certainly not going to ever resolve issues that are related to stress, for example, simply by taking a pill. All you're really going to be doing is kind of forcing the symptoms to be suppressed perhaps, or the form of some of the issues involved to change a little bit, but you're not actually changing the underlying causes. So I'm very much of the position that holistic approaches are necessary in all problem solving, and certainly when it comes to healing as well. So moving on to balancing, obviously also part of healing if you think about it. If you're out of balance, then how can your body work properly if your body's out of balance? If you imagine somebody standing on a seesaw in a park maybe, and just a simple child's seesaw, they're standing in the middle. If they lean too far one way, they're going to maybe fall off. If they're balanced perfectly in the middle, they can stay there all day. So the key with balance is to find the balance points and to maintain them, and to adapt to whatever needs to be adapted to, and to change whatever needs to change so that balance is found. And the most accurate definition that I found for balance is essentially that no part or aspect is being overpowered by any other part or aspect. So this applies to the human body, it applies to psychology, it applies to society, it applies to engineering, it applies to basically anything and everything that can have balance. I'm not aware of anything where that definition of balance doesn't work. So in the example of the seesaw, if you've got, let's say, your head overpowering the balance of the seesaw by leaning to one side, then the seesaw is going to tip you over and you're maybe going to fall off. Whereas if you balance perfectly in the middle, then there is no overpowering happening. And to take that into the human level, as an example, let's say if your mind, your logical linear thinking, is overpowering your emotional responses to your experiences, such that your mind is effectively saying, I'm not going to pay any attention to these feelings, they're not important, I'm just going to black them out, they don't have any use, then those feelings have been overpowered, their function has been denied, they're not being allowed to fulfill the role that they need to fulfill, and so you're not in balance. And if you consider that it's possible to do that particular form of overpowering just by deciding, I don't like anger, anger's bad, I'm going to block it out. And you think about how many people probably do that on a daily basis and things like that every day, then you can realise now how hugely out of balance many people are, probably all of us are, until we come to do the correct healing processes to correct these things. And then if you imagine, well, what happens if you block out your emotions like that? Well, they don't go anywhere. They don't just magically get destroyed. They stay undercurrent. They move into your unconscious self. So you're walking around a bit angry, but you don't really know why anymore. And then that builds up, and that builds up, and that builds up. And then you've got road rage situations. You've got people attacking other people for seemingly no reason. Murders and even wars could be built up over a significantly long period of lots of people having repressed emotions and anger and so on that boil over and explode. So that's a very brief introduction to an entire mechanism within human psychology which isn't really very well understood, but which the more you think about and explore and become conscious of within yourself, the more you can diffuse its negative consequences and effects in your own life and start to feel better. And I'm going to go really a lot more into depth on that as the series here progresses. So, and as the series evolves, which brings us on to the third intention, evolving. So this isn't about evolution for the sake of evolution, this is evolution for the purposes of healing and balancing in specific ways that are beneficial. So we're not talking about devolution, we're talking about evolution. We're not talking about becoming less conscious, less understanding of things and ourselves. We're becoming more conscious, more understanding, and gaining insights that serve us and help us to solve our problems. So I just want to briefly touch on a slightly tangential subject, but then I'm going to bring it back to what I've been talking about, which is, as you can see, I'm wearing this t-shirt which says PooTube, and it's clearly referencing YouTube as a parody, and this is for several reasons. One, as somebody who makes software and social networks and has been online for a long time, and who's been censored on many social networks for saying slightly controversial things and important things related to healing, really often no more controversial than what I'm saying here. I found that my own voice and videos have been silenced, and I write comments on YouTube, for example, and no one can see them except me, and it took me a couple of years to find out that was happening. Hundreds of other people complained about this as well, long threads in the YouTube forums, etc. So that is a form of overpowering. That's basically the corporation or the people involved or the government involved, whoever it is that's doing it, behind the scenes, overpowering my free speech and the flow of information that I'm attempting to put out. It's overpowering humanity, basically. Not just me, it's overpowering whoever they want to overpower. And if you don't know it's being done, then you're being doubly overpowered, because people say, well, you can just choose to use a different platform. Well, yes, except for if you don't even know it's being done, then why would you do it? Why would you move somewhere else? You don't even know you're being silenced. So they call it sandboxing, by the way, if you want to look up a bit more about that. Or shadow banning, I think it's sometimes called. So yeah, so that's a form of imbalance in software, in the internet, in society, in communication, and it's something that can be evolved and healed. And So I've been working for a while to help build the network called Steem, the blockchain. It's a cryptocurrency as well. And there's lots of websites in the Steem ecosystem that all run off of the Steem distributed database blockchain. And one of them is called DTube, which is their version of YouTube. And they're currently updating it regularly to include more and more features so that it gradually becomes much closer to YouTube in terms of what it offers. They've just added live streaming, and they're getting quite close really to equaling YouTube, and to also pay potentially everybody who posts on there. And I think a lot of people will earn a lot more money from that than they will ever earn from YouTube. And the best part of it really in a way is it's completely uncensored, because Steem is a blockchain. At least when you write on Steem, it's completely uncensored. There's no corporation that can censor it. There is if legal cases are made against DTube or Steemit.com, people involved may be forced to remove certain posts from that website, but you'll always be able to see the text that's posted to Steem on the Steem blockchain regardless. In any case, it's a heck of a lot better than having a corporation dictating who can and can't say what they want to say. So this is another example. This is really my point here of how healing, balancing, evolving applies not just to your daily life, but also to technology, to basically everything in society, beyond your own personal kind of body and psychology. So I'll just give another example here, a more practical example of what I'm really talking about, to give you a bit of a more grounded and rounded understanding of where I'm going to be going with this series. So there was a time in my life when I repeatedly, for whatever reason, kept hitting my knee really hard on very hard objects. And it was the same knee, it was the same position on my knee, and I was doing it every roughly 3 or 4 weeks. And it was cripplingly painful, and I have to say I'm very conscious of patterns that repeat in my life. I always look for why they're repeating, and sometimes they're just things which I can't really find an explanation for at that point. I just think, well, what possible reason could there be for me constantly hitting my knee in the same place? It's not that I'm doing it deliberately. What is it? So what I then found was that the pain on the last time this happened, it got so bad that I nearly blacked out and I was screaming from agony. And at this point I got triggered into suddenly realising, oh, all these healing texts I've been reading and books, they're explaining to me what to do in this situation. I haven't been doing it. Alright, so I'll do it. And I actually realised and remembered. And in that moment I evolved, basically. I became more conscious. So instead of kind of blacking out and going into unconscious with the pain, I shifted and changed and moved towards consciousness. And that was actually a key moment in my life. And what I'd been taught to do was to breathe into the pain and feel the pain instead of rejecting the pain, and give it acceptance. And that really is a form of love. It's a form of self-love from your mind, from your conscious self, to a part of your body, where instead of saying, no, I reject this part of me for having pain, it's not good enough, I'm just going to pretend it's not there, you're actually saying, no, I fully accept this part of myself, and I love this part of myself, and in a way I'm apologising for having created the circumstances where this part of myself has been hit so hard by so much pressure, and it's in a state of distress. And I understand and have compassion for this part of me, and I choose to send love to this part of myself. And I did that. It's the first time I'd ever done that, and within about 2 seconds the pain stopped completely, as if I'd never hit my leg, there was no injury, and I was just amazed. I was in shock from the pain, and then I was in shock again from the fact that I'd stopped the pain so quickly. And that was one of several experiences I've had in my life to do with healing and other important aspects of life, which in the blink of an eye I suddenly had realizations which changed everything for me, and really gave me a lot of inspiration to continue learning about these subjects and to eventually go on to help other people. So if you just think for a moment about how simple what I've just described is, the actual act of sending love to yourself, and then you realise that, at least I know that I've never heard anybody talk about that other than the people who have worked with me on specific healing methodologies. Outside of those fields I've never heard anyone say that. And yet it's so simple. I mean, it's such a basic thing. A loving mother would do that to their child, would pick the child up who's just hurt themselves and kind of, send them love effectively in one way or another to help them feel better. So why wouldn't we do it to ourselves? Don't we already really know that love feels good? Many people don't because they've never experienced that. But I can tell you it does, and it's a healing energy, certainly. So it's interesting, at least in Britain where I come from, a lot of the people that I've known would, in the past, would have said, oh, that's some hippie, new age nonsense, sending love to yourself is ridiculous, grow up kind of thing. But is it? I mean, if you're not sending love to yourself, aren't you still sending energy through yourself, through your thoughts? Don't your thoughts have an effect in you? And if they don't have love in them, then doesn't that mean that basically you are sending an absence of love to yourself all the time until you start sending love to yourself? Wouldn't it be better to send love to yourself? What's the problem with that? Ultimately, I personally have discovered that there's very unloving reasons for not teaching people about sending love to themselves, as you might logically conclude. When there is a huge absence of love, which there is on this planet, there's vested interest involved in keeping things that way, so that things don't become more loving, so that their traps and tricks that they use to overpower other people can continue to work, and they can continue to climb and be at the top of power pyramids and artificial hierarchies. So in actuality, this is part of why being loving and finding loving intentions doesn't just heal you and your local injuries, it can also heal massive problems in society that we don't really seem to generally have solutions for. But in actuality, a simple shift from unlovingness to lovingness can often be the snowflake that starts the avalanche, which causes huge changes. And so yeah, in the other episodes of this series, I'm going to be going into great detail about psychology that I understand, the emotional self, the heart that connects all of our aspects together and brings balance to ourselves, and some of the ways that I perceive this kind of approach can help both individuals and their relationships with each other and society as a whole. And I just want to leave you with a memory that surfaced with regard to balancing and the heart, which is apparently and actually quite an old story from India, I think, regarding a yoga master, let's say, who was visited one day by two men who had been arguing, and they were really seriously arguing with each other, almost at the point of killing each other. And this wise person was asked to solve the situation. And within a very short space of time, effectively, he said, when you're so angry with people and each other, it's because you aren't talking to each other from your heart. Your hearts are not listening to each other. And that in itself apparently solved the argument. Because once there's the realization that you've been stuck in your brain and your mind, running around this hall of mirrors inside your logic about why this other person is wrong and bad and why you're right and why they're causing all these troubling feelings, and you have to attack the cause of these troubling feelings, and all these sort of programs that we hold unconsciously, these habits. As soon as you're drawn out of that into your heart and you feel your heart, suddenly there's this opening of a completely different angle on the situation, and now you realize, oh yeah, that's important, isn't it? Feeling and listening to people and their actual heart, that vibration, that message, that energy is also important. In fact, maybe it's even more important than all this logic I've been using and all these beliefs I've created. Maybe that's who I really am. Maybe my heart is actually the power within me that causes balance and good connection and solves problems. Maybe I can just focus on that for a bit and have compassion, and maybe then, oh no, I don't feel so angry. Right, okay, well, why were we arguing? Oh yeah, it's because we don't respect each other, basically. Why don't we respect each other? Good question. It's because I don't really love enough. Oh, okay, why don't I love enough? And then you can just keep following that through, and eventually you're going to have a great deal of enlightening discoveries and a deeper harmony both with yourself and with other people. So that's the direction I'm going in. I don't mean to keep talking on and on, but if you've liked this video and you appreciate where I'm going, or if you've got comments, then I look forward to reading them when you're ready, and also look forward to continuing on with this into future episodes. So until next time, may we all experience unconditional love.